Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'll be discussing probably the most important subject for everybody, frankly, and that is the turning point in our recorded human history, which is the historical resurrection of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Today I'll examine the historical data that there is for this historical event, and then we'll see if it matches the historical criteria which historians have always used to determine whether an event is historically plausible or not. So, to start off, what is the claim for the resurrection? I mean, it is among the scholarly consensus, so even among agnostic atheist scholars, Bart Ehrman, for example, that Jesus Christ was a real person. He was crucified under Pontius Pilate. His disciples thought they had seen the risen Jesus, and that the event itself sparked major growth of Christianity, starting from the proclamation of the disciples who went on to die for their faith in the resurrection and in Christ ultimately. So this is the data which which the scholars of today's time agree on. Now the question becomes, what is the most plausible explanation for it? Because the fact that the disciples believed they had seen Jesus does not automatically prove it. So we have, like we do in history, to look at the criteria of what makes a historical event historical, and to see whether the information on the resurrection fits these criteria. So to start off, we have a few criteria. So first of all, we have date. When was the documentation of an event written down? For the resurrection, those are the Gospels and Paul's epistles. Even the most skeptical scholars date the Gospels, the Gospel of Mark, to the Gospel of John from 40 to 100 AD, so the first century, and we can dive into the more definite years, but quite frankly, if we look at antiquity as a whole, such a small period of time between the event itself, the claimed event itself, and its earliest documentation is unknown. Like, for example, Alexander the Great, the earliest writing we have of him ever existing is 400 years after his supposed existence, and we never doubt his existence, for example. But now on the resurrection, we have very early documentation and records of it, namely those are the Gospels, and as already said, the epistles of Paul, which are dated in the first century, which already gives, or should I say, already fits and checks the box for the criteria for early dating. And now we go on to our next criteria, which is reliability. Now, there, of course, nonetheless, there is some debate on the reliability of the Gospels, but if we take into account their non-contradictory content, which is also another criteria, and their early documentation, and the attestations of people who knew the disciples, that the disciples were who they claimed to be, I believe make the picture pretty clear, and that is that the Gospels are written by eyewitnesses. We have people like Polycarp of Smyrna, for example, who was disciple of John, who not only quotes his teacher's gospel, but also refers to the gospel as being written by John. So basically, we have this long-standing tradition starting from the first century uh, which carries on even today, to the original writers of the Gospels. And I think, historically speaking, the reliability is granted to the Gospels due to the enormous attestation of third parties about their eyewitness testimonies, and also their non contradictory content, which support their reliability, as it is seen often in history, uh, that many documents contradict, and thus making them less reliable, which is not the case for the Gospels. And now we go on to our third criteria, which is contradiction. There are no Gospels, there are no contradictions in the Gospels, nor in the Pauline epistles. So that basically means that when one event is recorded from different perspectives, they contain different details, but nevertheless they describe the main event. And if they do not contradict themselves, then the only, historically speaking, the only plausible, I should say, answer would be that they're actually telling the truth. And so with these criteria, there are also several more, but for the sake of it, to keep it shorter, I'll stick with these three. So for the resurrection, we have the early dating, the reliability of the eyewitnesses, those are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the non-contradictory content of the Gospels, which further supports their historical correctness on the topic. So, with that being said, not only did we showcase the reliability of the Gospels in general, that what they're saying is not a legend, but really an eyewitness attestation of what actually happened, but also we see that the historical information for the resurrection of Jesus Christ fits all the criteria for a historical event, and also taking into account the martyrdom of the disciples and how they went on to die, every one of them. Psychologically, no one would die for a lie. And even granted one exception, those were not two or one people, but rather those were 12 people, and then after that even more. So we have a boatload of people who died for what they have seen. So eyewitnesses dying for the truth, and Christianity spreading rapidly throughout the whole Mediterranean lands, which not only fulfills Old Testament prophecies, but also supports the fact that the resurrection claim is not a legend developed further on, but rather a belief that was started in the first century, which supports the resurrection itself, and also that for this belief people were prepared to die, many people who psychologically wouldn't die for a lie. So now we come to the conclusion: what is the most plausible answer to the facts that were presented to us? And that is that the resurrection is actually a historical fact, and that Christ is the only person incarnate who rose on his own authority, which would de facto declare him and prove his divinity, declare his status and confirm his divinity. And with that, that's a very shortened kind of summary of the resurrection event. And with that being said, I wish you a very pleasant evening. God bless. Christ is risen.